The snow had come early that year, and the northern wind carried whispers of war far and wide. Robb Stark stood atop the battlements of River Run, the chill biting through his furs as he gazed into the grey horizon. Below, his men were restless, grumbling not from cold, but from confusion. Word had come from Dragonstone Stannis. Baratheon was calling for an alliance. Robb's bannermen were split. Some saw it as strength in numbers. Others called Stannis a zealot and warned against trusting a man who burned gods and kings alike. But Catelyn Stark, weary with grief yet clear in thought, spoke firmly in the war council. We cannot win this war alone. We are surrounded. Tywin sits in Harrenhal, and Roose grows ambitious in the west. Stannis may not be the king you would choose, but he fights the same enemy. Robb had changed. The boy who rode south was long gone. Now he was king in the north, hardened by betrayal and blood. He still felt the weight of Ned's death, the haunting eyes of Theon's treachery, and the bitter taste of the Karstark execution. This war had taken his youth, and now it demanded more. He nodded solemnly. "Send the raven," he said. "Tell Stannis Baratheon that the north remembers and it will stand with fire, if fire will stand with the north." They met in the cold shadow of Moat Cailin, where stone ruins whispered of ancient wars. Robb arrived with grey wind at his side, his bannermen tight around him. Stannis stood with a smaller force, fewer men but hardened, unbending like their lord. And beside him, cloaked in red and silence, stood Melisandre. Robb didn't like her. Something about her eyes made him feel exposed, like she could see every lie, every regret. But he greeted Stannis with the respect due a king, even one who would never be king in the north. "We fight the same war," Robb said, voice steady. "And I'll not kneel to Joffrey, nor to any Lannister that sits that throne." Stannis gave a tight nod. "Then we are brothers in purpose, if not in faith. But know, this I am the one true king. I'll accept your swords, not your terms." Robb clenched his jaw. "The North is not a vassal to any southern king. We join you as allies, not as servants. I won't kneel to another." The tension thickened. Seer Davos stepped forward, his voice softer. "My lord, the boy speaks with the pride of his house, but he's no fool. Together we have a chance. Alone we bleed for vultures." Melisandre finally spoke. "The Lord of Light has shown me flames of war, of blood, of kings. Together, the wolf and the stag will burn their enemies." Robb didn't flinch. "I don't follow your gods. I believe in steel and honor. Even steel melts," she said, her voice like wind through graveyards. But in the end, the alliance was struck. Robb and Stannis would march south. The terms were clear. Independence for the north once the Lannisters were destroyed, and Robb's recognition of Stannis' claim to the Iron Throne. No kneeling, no bending, just blood, fire, and purpose. The march south was a strange one. Northerners didn't trust the Red Priests. The Baratheon soldiers found the northern discipline cold and humorless. Yet side by side, they moved like a blade. Their scouts brought word of Lannister. Weakness Tywin had split his forces, and King's Landing stood vulnerable. But cracks began to show. Robb's bannermen grumbled about Melisandre's rituals, about the burning of statues and old gods. The Lord of Light was not their god, and when a storm swept through camp one night and lightning struck the tree under which they'd prayed, many took it as a sign. "Bad luck," muttered Great John Umber. "You trust fire too long, and it burns your soul." Robb tried to hold them together. He spoke often with Stannis, but found the man rigid, hard to like. There was no warmth in him, only duty and fire. One night, Melisandre came to Robb's tent unbidden. "You carry a heavy crown, king in the north." He rose to his feet. "I didn't ask for it. Few do. But the flames showed me your face once, long ago, before Renly died. You were bathed in ice, standing against shadows. You could be more than a king. You could be a savior." "I'm not your savior," Robb said. "I'm just trying to win a war." She stepped closer, eyes glowing in the firelight. "But your war may destroy you if you refuse your destiny." Then she turned and left, her red cloak trailing like blood in the wind. Robb slept poorly that night, and when he awoke, he found a message waiting. "Casterly Rock has emptied. Tywin moves east. King's Landing is ripe." They had one chance, one strike. Robb gave the order. "Prepare to march. The direwolf and the flame will strike the lion's heart." But deep inside, a knot had begun to form in his gut. Something didn't feel right. The march to King's Landing was grueling. Rain turned the roads to rivers of mud, and hunger chewed at the soldiers like rats on a carcass. Yet still they moved. Side by side, the northern banners flapped beside the black stag of Stannis. At night, their camps burned with red lights. Stannis' men prayed to fire, while the northerners huddled beneath their weirwood tokens, whispering to old gods under grey skies. Robb had never felt more alone. Even grey wind seemed restless, pacing the edges of the camp, growling low at the red woman whenever she passed. Catelyn noticed it too. One night she sat beside Robb in his tent, her face worn thin with worry. "You've changed," she said quietly. "We all have," Robb replied, staring at the map between them. "I was a boy when we rode south. I'm not that boy anymore. You don't trust them." He looked up, met her eyes. "I don't trust anyone who burns people to prey." Catelyn sighed. "Then why did you ally with them?" "Because I had no other choice." Silence stretched between them. Outside, the wind howled like a dying wolf. 2 weeks from the capital, they made camp near Blackwater Rush. Scouts returned with urgent news. King's Landing was vulnerable. The city walls were strong, but its defenders weak. Joffrey had grown paranoid, and the Tyrells had not yet sent full support. Stannis saw his moment. "We strike at dawn," he declared. "Let fire and fury cleanse the throne." Robb didn't speak. His council was tense. The Karstarks grumbled about Stannis' arrogance. Mage Mormont wanted to flank, not charge. Even Seer Brynden Tully advised caution. But it wasn't the plan that troubled Robb. It was the absence of Tywin. Casterly Rock had emptied weeks ago, but no one had seen his banners. No reports, no ambush, just silence. "Something's wrong," Robb said. "Tywin's never idle. He's a spider in armor. He waits in silence until you walk into his web." Yet Stannis pushed on. "Then we strike before he weaves the web. We take the throne now." Robb stared at the red glow in the distance, where Melisandre stood atop a hill, arms raised toward the stars. He hated how the soldiers looked at her like she was a god. The battle began under a sky choked with ash. Stannis led the center, Robb the left flank. As they charged toward the gates, wildfire ignited in pockets along the walls. But it was less than they feared. Tyrion had exhausted the city's stores during the last siege. The gates cracked under the battering ram. Fire and steel clashed in the narrow streets. The golden cloaks scattered. The small folk screamed. Joffrey, true to form, had already fled the city with Cersei toward Casterly Rock. The throne room was empty. Stannis planted his banner on the Red Keep. The usurper is gone. The throne is mine. But Robb saw none of it. His flank had taken. The Worstam bushed in the alleys by hired blades and sellswords. He lost 400 men in 1 hour. Grey Wind was wounded. Great John Umber lay unconscious. And still no sign of Tywin. That night the city burned. Melisandre walked through the ruins, her eyes blazing with satisfaction. The usurpers fall. The Lord of Light rewards the faithful. But Robb's heart was heavy. They had won the battle, yes, but it felt hollow. Too easy, too quiet. He found Davos by the Blackwater Bay docks, overseeing prisoners. "Where is Tywin?" Robb asked. Davos shook his head. "I don't like this, my lord. Feels like we took a baited prize." A raven arrived the next day from the twins. Walder. Frey was dead, poisoned, his sons butchered. Roose Bolton had taken the twins, and in the north, Winterfell burned once again. A new banner flew above it, not a kraken, not a flayed man, a golden lion. Tywin had struck the north while Robb was gone, and now he sat in Winterfell. Robb read the letter in silence, then crumpled it in his fist. The lion didn't wait. In his den, he waited in hours. He turned to Stannis. "You wanted the throne. You have it, but I'm going home." Stannis frowned. "We still need each other. The realm must be secured," but Robb was already walking away. Back to the north, back to war. The north was bleeding. Villages torched, daughters stolen, sons hung from trees with flayed skins left as warnings. The ravens that reached Robb were soaked in pain. Tywin Lannister, cunning to the core, had struck where it hurt most, not at the crown, but at the soul of the north. Winterfell had fallen again, this time not to traitors or squabbles, but to brutal strategy. Roose Bolton had turned. The leech-hearted bastard had poisoned Frey wine at the twins, seized the crossing, and flung open the gates to Lannister gold. Now Roose sat as warden of the north, crowned by lions and cloaked in treachery. Robb felt the weight of it on every breath. He had trusted too many, played too clean. While he honored alliances, made noble vows, and fought with steel, Tywin played with shadows and poison. The Game of Thrones did not reward honor. The northern host, bloodied but burning with fury, began the long march home. Robb's men barely spoke. Their eyes were hollow, hands clenched to hilts as they dreamed of revenge. The alliance with Stannis had given them a city, but cost them their home. In camp, Robb sat in silence beside Grey Wind, brushing the mud from his fur. The direwolf still limped from the wounds of King's Landing, but his eyes were fierce. "I should have listened to my gut," Robb muttered. "We took the throne, but we lost everything that mattered." Catelyn came to him that night, her voice trembling. "We can still take it back." "No," Robb said. "We'll never take Winterfell with fire priests and city soldiers. This isn't their war. This is ours." Stannis was furious. "You abandon the capital now." He barked in the Red Keep's hall, where the Iron Throne stood cold and heavy. "I didn't come here for a chair of melted swords," Robb replied. "I came to destroy the Lannisters, and now they sit in my father's hall. You swore an alliance. I swore to fight Joffrey, not to bend the knee to your god or your fire, which the north will never bow." Melisandre stepped forward, her voice low but sharp. "You walk away from destiny." Robb turned to her. Your flames lied. They promised victory. They gave me ruin. She smiled, eerie and calm. You misunderstand. Victory is not always kind, but it always burns. Robb said nothing more. The next morning, the direwolf banners were gone from the walls of the Red Keep. The North was going home. As the northern host moved north, they found ruin in their path. Villages blackened, crops salted, refugees weeping in the woods. Bolton and Lannister alike had torn through the land like wolves through a lambing field, and in their wake fear grew. Men spoke of flayed bodies nailed, 2 trees of banners stitched with faces. Bolton had taken Ramsay into his fold, made him his true-born son. Together they ruled through terror. When Robb reached Moat Cailin, the gate to the north, he found it guarded by mercenaries wearing red cloaks with gold lions. The siege was brutal, but the northerners fought with the rage of men who had lost too much. When the gates finally fell, Robb stood before the dying captain and said nothing. He simply watched as grey wind tore his throat open. It was war now for crowns, but for justice. Robb sent out a raven to every house that still flew, the direwolf. The message was simple. The North remembers. Roose Bolton has betrayed us. The lion sits in our home. Winterfell must be taken back. With fire or ice we rise. The responses came swiftly. From House Mormont, the bear does not forget. We ride. For Winterfell, from House Reed, the Crannogman strike from the water. Tell the flayed man to look over his shoulder. Even from the shattered remnants of House Umber, a vow of blood, for the great John and for the North. And quietly, from deep in the hills, a whisper from a house long thought silent. The wolves still howl in the snow. Winter was coming, and this time it came not as a season, but as vengeance. The march to Winterfell was not swift, was patient, vengeful, and precise. Robb Stark moved like a wolf in the dark. His forces spread wide through forests and frozen rivers, striking outposts and supply lines with ruthless efficiency. He was no longer a boy leading his father's banners. He was a hunter, and Winter was the prey. Grey wind ranged ahead, a silent ghost in the night, sowing fear among the Bolton men who dared patrol the roads. Every scream in the dark, every flayed corpse found hanging upside down, Robb made sure was answered with double the blood. No more banners burned, no more kneeling. This was not a war for diplomacy, it was a reckoning. Roose Bolton sat within Winterfell's cold halls, his face blank as ever, reading the reports brought by trembling ministers. His bastard son, Ramsay, mocked the panic of the lords. Let the wolf come, Ramsay grinned. We'll peel his skin and wear it to bed. But Roose knew better. The North was not like the South it remembered, and for every house that bent the knee to the lion, 10 more sharpened knives in the dark. You've provoked a storm, Roose said to Ramsay, his voice flat, and storms don't care who wears armor. Still, he believed he had time. Tywin had promised reinforcements. Gold flowed into Winterfell. Roose had installed fear like stonework, but even he could sense the ground shifting. Ravens stopped arriving, roads grew silent, and snow began to fall with a strange, deliberate weight. Robb met with his allies beneath the shadow of an old godswood near the Barrowlands. The Mormonts, the Glovers, even remnants of the Hornwoods and Tallhearts arrived. The Starks had always ruled with respect, not terror, and now those old debts came due. I won't promise peace, Robb told them, only justice. The lords cheered, but Catelyn warned him later, justice turns sour when it's fed by rage. Robb nodded. Then let it sour, I'll drink every drop. The siege of Winterfell began with no horns, no banners, just snow. Robb had learned from his enemies. He sent no messengers, he offered no terms. His men struck at the outer walls in the dead of night, slipping over the snow-covered battlements like ghosts. Ramsay sent out patrols, none returned. Within days, food inside the castle ran low. The Lannister soldiers unused to the cold, unused to fear, started deserting. Roose executed 5 of them. Ramsay flayed a 6th and left the skinless corpse hanging from the gate. But that only fed the fear. The north was closing in. Then came the night fire. Melisandre returned, uninvited, with a small retinue from the south. She found Robb outside his tent, sharpening his sword. "I warned you," she said, her eyes glowing in the firelight. "The cold is rising. I told you, I don't follow your god." She ignored that. "Let me help you. The Lord of Light wishes the Bolton line ended. Burn one of them, and the gate will fall." Robb stood. "We'll win without sacrifice." Melisandre smiled. "You already have." She handed him a scroll. It bore the seal of House Frey. The surviving sons of Walder Frey, bitter and broken, had pledged revenge. Roose Bolton had betrayed them too. And now they offered their men to the wolf in exchange for vengeance and a place in the New North. Robb stared at the paper, then at the Red Woman. "You didn't burn anyone for this. I only lit the way." He turned away. "Stay out of my war, priestess. I'll not trade one devil for another." But that night, the gates of Winterfell exploded in fire. A traitor from within, perhaps a Frey, perhaps not, had opened the way, and Robb Stark led his army through the ashes. The wolves had returned home. Winterfell burned, not in the wild, uncontrollable way of wildfire, but with purpose, controlled, directed. The outer halls crackled with fire as Robb's forces stormed through stone and blood, reclaiming the fortress inch by inch. There were no calls for surrender, no quarter. The North had come not to parley, but to punish. Robb fought at the front. Grey wind howled beside him, his muzzle soaked red, his fangs bared. Every Lannister cloak that rose was cut down. Every Bolton guard found was left where he fell. Robb moved like vengeance itself, his blade dancing between flame and frost. The great hall was last, reinforced, barricaded, but not invincible. Roose Bolton waited within, cold and still, surrounded by his personal guard. Ramsay stood beside him, laughing even now, as if death were a game he had long grown bored of. "Well, look who's come home." Ramsay sneered as Robb stepped through the broken doors, flanked by Mormont and red banners. "You left it in. Better shape than I expected. Thought you'd decorate it with another flayed Stark by now." Robb didn't reply. His eyes were locked on Roose. "You murdered the Freys, betrayed my trust, sold Winterfell to lions." Roose's voice was as smooth and empty as ever. "You played a child's war, Robb Stark. This was the price of victory." "This wasn't victory," Robb said quietly. "This was cowardice." A heartbeat passed, then chaos. Steel clashed. Arrows flew. Mormont men surged forward, and grey wind leapt straight at Ramsay, who screamed and raised his daggers. They rolled across the floor in a storm of blood and snarling teeth. Robb pushed through the melee, locking blades with Roose. The older man fought well, precise, calm, methodical, but Robb fought with something Roose had long discarded: fury, honor, pain, the fire of 1,000 wrongs. Their swords met again, and again until Robb slipped his blade under Roos's ribs, straight through the chainmail. The warden of the North gasped, his eyes wide for once, as he looked down at the blood soaking through his pale armor. "No flaying today," Robb whispered. Roose Bolton fell. Outside, Ramsay's corpse lay torn open, grey wind still growling low beside it. The beast limped now, his wounds deep, but he stood proud. The banners of House Stark rose above Winterfell once more. In the days that followed, Robb restored order but not peace. He oversaw trials, executed those who aided the Boltons, burned every flayed banner. He didn't rejoice, didn't rest. He stood alone on the battlements, staring at the land that had suffered so much. Snow drifted down around him, quiet and soft. Catelyn came to him one night. "It's done," she said. "You brought us home." Robb didn't look. At her, at what cost? "You saved the North. I lost everything else." Stannis sent ravens demanding Robb return to King's Landing to help stabilize the realm. That the Iron Throne still needed its northern ally, Robb never replied. He sent one message back to the south: the North is free. Then he closed the roads. No Lannister, no Baratheon, no Red Priest would rule here again. The North remembered, and this time it would never forget.